Hi everyone, it's Helen from Witchcrafts. Welcome back to my channel and this video, which is the third part of my series in how to make a junk journal from scratch, like this one. So currently I'm waiting for the cover that we finished gluing in the previous episode to dry. That's sat on my dining room table with some heavy books on top of it to help squash it down. The glue shouldn't take more than a couple of hours to completely dry, but while we're waiting, what I thought we would do next is to sort out the signatures for the junk journal. Now this is the one that I made previously, which sort of inspired this whole series of how to make one. And I just thought I'd use it to explain to you what a signature is. Now, a signature is a term used by bookbinders to name a group of papers that form together to make one bundle. So you can see in this journal here that I've got 3 signatures, so 3 bundles of papers, which are then stitched or glued into the spine of the book. Now you can see in this one that this is a hidden spine, which we're going to be doing the same method as this for binding the signatures into the next journal that we're currently waiting for the glue to dry. And in this journal there is a huge variety of different kinds of papers. So if you want a proper look through this, then go and check out my very first video where I do a more detailed flip through of this journal, which I will link up in the iCard in the top corner of this video and also down in the description box. So what we need to do is gather together papers that we've got that could be suitable to use, and I'll give you an idea of the sorts of things that you might want to include in your journal. Right, so this is my bundle that I've put together. And I've got a huge range of different papers in here, so I'll just go through and explain a little bit about what they all are. This is, I would call it tracing paper, but I've seen some crafters refer to this as vellum. But if you know anything about papers and history, you'll know that vellum was actually made from calf skin in the Middle Ages and was used to make books out of. So this is definitely not vellum, this is a plasticky paper, but it's see-through and it's got quite a nice texture to it. It's very smooth and flat. And what I've done with this, if I just show you a regular piece of the tracing paper, you can see that it's just a sort of grey see-through. Now what I've done here is I've actually printed onto this. It's quite difficult to see. Let me see if I put a white sheet behind it. It's easier to see a little bit maybe. So I have printed an image onto this using my inkjet printer, which is just a bog standard Canon inkjet printer that I use for everything. I can explain how I've done this if you're interested to know that. I'll maybe do a quick video tutorial on how to do that. But this is some images that I have just printed onto these pieces of vellum using my inkjet printer. So my plan is to have 3 signatures for this current journal that we're making. So I have got 3 pages of printed tracing paper. Just move that one out of the way. And then I've got 3 pieces of non-printed tracing paper. Now this is some tea or coffee dyed paper, and I've done exactly the same as I did for the tracing paper. I've just put some images into Microsoft Word and then I've increased the transparency of the image in order to make a sort of a background ghosty image. So it doesn't stand out too much. You could still write or draw on these, stick extra things on the top. And you can see the other side is just brown from where I have coffee dyed it. Again, I can show you how I do that. It's really quite simple. There's a number of different ways of doing it, but if you're interested to see how I do it, then I'm very happy to make a video on that as well. So I've got 3 pieces of that, 3 pieces of just plain unprinted tea or coffee dyed paper. This one's a little bit ripped, so I wouldn't recommend trying to print on anything that's ripped. Then we've got some pieces of, I think this is baking or parchment paper. The last time I bought parchment paper it was brown, and then I've just bought a new box and it's white. So that's not quite so nice, but this makes a lovely rustling sound. I wouldn't recommend that you try and reuse anything that you've baked onto, because it's going to have grease on it, which could be a bit problematic. So I've got some pieces, I've got another one here, here we are. So this one's quite a lot bigger, so we're probably going to need to cut those down. Then I've got, this is some backing paper that I have obviously done something on, and then I've kept the backing paper. It looks like maybe I've sprayed some coffee onto some paper to antique it a little bit. So I've got a couple of pieces of that. This is some pages out of an old exercise book. So I just removed the staples from the middle and then just pull the pages out, and you get this sort of double page. These are some pages out of some music books, some sort of from the 50s or the 60s, I think. They were very old and scruffy and tatty, so I have rescued them. So we've got those. I've got some envelopes here. These are just ordinary plain white envelopes. These ones haven't been used, but they're really good for making pockets that you can tuck little things into, bus tickets or cinema tickets or whatever you want. You can obviously do things with these. You could run them through your printer. You could coffee or tea dye these if you wanted to, because they do look a bit boring at the moment. Then I've got some book pages. Now these again are from a book that was completely falling apart. It's absolutely had it. I'll show you what I mean. So I got this in a charity shop, and as you can see, someone's attempted to glue or to sellotape the cover back on again, but even that has failed. The cover's bent, the pages are all falling out and ripped. And the paper itself is really quite fragile, so we're going to have to be very careful with that. But I really like it. I really like the look of the paper and how it feels, and it's actually really nice for drawing on or sticking other things onto that you can then incorporate into your journal. And also, as I said before, I've rescued it, so these pages will live on rather than just ending up in landfill or an incinerator. We're going to be reusing these and giving them a new purpose in life. Well, I've got another piece of printed tea-dyed paper. These are some pages from a exercise book that I bought while we were on holiday in France, and they obviously use this sort of grid pattern. Again, they're quite boring, quite plain, so you could, again, tea or coffee dye these or stain them with something if you wanted to make them look a bit more interesting. And then here, these are some offcuts from my previous journal that I made, so some extra bits of music paper and some of that exercise book paper. And then this is just some little bits of A4 lined paper that you might use at college or whatever. And again, I've tea or coffee dyed these pages. And then finally, I've got one piece of this left. Now this is some handmade paper that I made using just recycling junk mail, mushed it all up and made it into some paper. It's not the best in the world, it's quite grey, and it did have some little bits of plastic in it from the windows of the envelopes that I shredded. But it's quite nice, it's got a nice texture to it, and because I've only got one piece of this left, I'm not going to use this as a page in my journal. I'm going to set this aside and actually make use of this for something else, to make something to go into the journal. So then what we need to do is we need to sort of make 3 piles of the different papers and look at what we've got in each pile. So I'm just going to distribute these amongst the different piles so we can see how many we've got in each signature and work out if we've got enough or if we need to go find some more. Okay, so here's our 3 bundles of papers that are going to become our signatures, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in each of those. So that's 9 bundles. Now I've left these ones out because these are quite big and they're going to need cutting down to size, but that's what we're going to do next, is get all of these down to the right size. Okay, so because my journal cover is still drying, I have got a piece of paper here that I have cut to be approximately the size of 1 page in the journal. Now, the way that the signatures work is that they are all folded in half. So each of these pages in this journal is a page folded in half, and then you can see the stitching here in the middle. So this is the size of 1/2 page. So in order to make these double size pages that can then be folded in half, we need this to actually be, or the pages that we're going to make in the signatures to be double this size. I probably didn't explain that very well, but hopefully you'll get what I mean as we go along. So if we take one of these first of all, and as you can see, that's not going to be wide enough to get 2 out of this, but all I'm going to do for now is just fold this in half, and then we'll worry about the height later, because as you can see, this is quite a lot taller, so that would stick out of the top of the journal, which isn't necessarily a problem, but the ends can get a bit scruffy if it's sticking out too far, so we'll probably need to cut that down. So what I'm going to do next, and I'll speed this up because you don't need to watch me doing this, is any of the papers that aren't folded in half, I'm going to go ahead and fold in half, and I'm going to use a bone folder, which is not made of bone, it's made of plastic, and I'm just going to use that to make the creases of where I'm folding the papers in half a lot sharper. It just makes things a bit neater, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so I've completed that for one of the bunch of papers. I'm not going to do it for the other 2 at the moment because it's exactly the same and you don't need to see me doing that. So now what we need to do is work out which of our papers need to be trimmed down in order to make them this size. Now that they're folded in half, it's much easier because you can see instantly whether they fit or not. So obviously this one's going to be quite a small one because it's obviously just an envelope folded in half, but that's fine. We don't mind different sizes. This one's too narrow, but again, it doesn't matter, but it is a bit tall. So what I'm going to do is, you could use a paper cutter, you could use scissors, however you want to do it, but I'm going to use a ruler. And all I'm going to do is just see where the edge is and then just tear that down so that it's the right height, because as I said, you don't want paper sticking out too much above the top of your journal because otherwise you're going to end up with the edges of the paper getting all dog-eared. So I'm going to go through and repeat this. Now on these ones where I have printed onto the tracing paper, I'm actually going to take a bit off the top and the bottom just so that we're not left with this kind of blank bit where obviously the printer couldn't print completely over that. So we'll just trim these down like so. And I'm going to do this edge here as well just because I don't like where it looks different from where the printer hasn't printed on it. If you find it difficult to grab hold of a very skinny piece of paper, you could use a pair of pliers or a pair of tweezers just to grab hold of it, just to make that a little bit easier for you. So this one obviously isn't printed, so I'm just going to tear this one down approximately. Again, this printed one, I'm going to do top and bottom to get rid of that non-printed border. Obviously, if your pages are smaller, you don't need to do that. I'm going to leave those because they're so tiny, you can hardly see that there's anything there. This one here, I'm going to make this one a bit smaller actually because I want to get rid of that bit where it's ripped because that's only going to get worse. Okay. Book page. Now you need to decide if you want the top of the page or the bottom of the page. I think I'm going to keep the title and then I'm going to just take some off the, I think I'm going to take some off the bottom actually. So let's just move that up a little bit. It's easier when you're tearing a folded piece of paper if you tear from the folded edge rather than tearing from the unfolded edge, just because it then makes it easier to get both pieces in one go. Again, if you get these little scratty bits at the bottom, you can either just break them off like this, or you can cut them off or just leave them. Now this one, I'm thinking we can get 2 pages out of one, so I'm just going to fold this one in half again, and then I'm going to rip it down this way. So this is the folded edge up the top here, so I'm just going to fold it, rip it this way. So now we've got 2 for the price of 1, and they're only a little bit smaller than the size. They are quite a lot too wide though, so I am going to just trim that down a little bit along the width. You can get proper tearing rulers that have got a sort of a decal wavy edge at the side. I haven't got one, and I have to be honest, I've never really seen the point of them. If you really want it to be wiggly, then you could just rip it without using any kind of ruler. I'm going to do the same with this big one as well, so I'm going to fold this in half. And then just rip that like that. So again, we've got 2 for the price of 1. It's a bit too wide, so we will just take it off about there. And then the last thing we need to do is that backing paper and baking paper. So this is the backing paper. Let's start with the smallest of them. So this is about twice as much too big. Would it be like that way? It might be a bit narrow if we do it that way. So I'm going to, what shall we do here? Let's rip it in half along the middle here. That. So now we've got 2. And then let's just offer that up against there. So it's a bit too tall and a bit too wide. So let's make it shorter and narrower. Okay. We've got 2 of those now ready to go, so I'll put one in my pile, keep the other one for the next signature. And then this one, I think I'm just going to use this smaller piece as it is, and then these I'll come back to for the other signatures. So what we've got now, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pages for our signatures, which that's a good number actually, because obviously when you times that by 3, you're going to end up with a nice big thick journal. So the next thing to do is to decide what order we want these pages to appear in our journal. So start with whichever one you want on the front. If I can get it open, yeah. And then we're just going to put things in, and then obviously you can play around with the order of them until you're happy with what you've got. So try and kind of muddle them up a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily recommend having 2 pieces the same right next to each other. So just kind of jumble things up a little bit so you've got some nice variety going on. Now this paper is already really quite damaged, so I would say that needs to go sort of in a sandwich between some of the other pieces to kind of give it a little bit of support. shake them down. Then they don't all have to line up. I quite like seeing them being a bit kind of all over the place, where they don't match up and there's things which are smaller or bigger across them. So I'm actually going to put this one in the middle here, like that. So that's the first signature done. So we'll just have a quick flip through and make sure everything is lined up how we want it to be. So we've got different heights of papers that are going to go in different places. Okay. So I'll now repeat all of the steps that I've just done with my other 2 signatures, and then I'll meet you back here once I've got my 3 signatures all assembled. I just thought I'd pop the camera back on again to show you this. This is something I've done in other journals. This is the music paper, and obviously we know it's too wide. But what you can do is, instead of tearing off the side, we can actually just fold this in on itself, which will give you some extra pages. Or alternatively, what you can do is glue or stitch down the edges to make a pocket. And this is something that I've done quite a lot in my other journal, and I will be doing more of. So that's what I'm going to do here. Instead of cutting the paper off and just having more little scratty bits kicking around, I'm going to just fold the page edge in a bit just to make it smaller. The 3 signatures are assembled. I have varied the order in which I've put the different papers into the signatures. And for some of the ones that were a bit longer, I have just folded these in, and we can either just leave them as folded in or turn them into pockets or tuck spots or what have you. So the next thing we need to do is to try these signatures against the cover, just to make sure that everything's going to fit nicely. So the cover is now dry. The inside papers where we glued them on have dried. Now if you can see here, there's a little bit of discoloration from the glue, which is a bit of a shame. It's kind of leached through and made these dark patches, which I've not seen that happen with the 3-in-1 glue before, so I'm a bit surprised about that, but it's not the end of the world. There are things we can do later on to cover this up and stop that from being an issue. But what the main thing is that we need to do is just pop these signatures all together like this, and then just offer them up to the inside spine of the book, and then check that we're happy with how that is going to go. So you can see some of the pages are sticking out a little bit, which I'm not too bothered about. We will just leave that as it is for now. Can always trim these down a little bit more if we want to. Now what I've seen other people do, and I've done myself in the past, is these pockets here, before you bind the signatures into the cover, you could put this through your sewing machine and do some stitching or whatever you want to do, or do the gluing before you bind the signatures in, because obviously you've got a lot more freedom to be able to do that. But I'm not going to bother doing that because I'm not sure really what I want to do with this at the moment. So we will just leave any of these folded pages as they are. And the next job that we have to tackle is actually binding the signatures into the cover using the hidden spine method. Now I'm not going to start on that now because it's a fairly lengthy process. It's a bit tricky, but it's not over complicated. So I'm going to do that in the next video. So if you'd like to find out how I'm going to attach the signatures into the journal cover, then come back and join me in my next video. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!